A ship vanishes into a churning sea, leaving no trace. The Bermuda Triangle has claimed over 50 ships and 20 aircraft in just the last 100 years. This stretch of ocean holds one of the world's most enduring mysteries, a puzzle where fact blurs with fantastic fiction. By the end of this journey, you will understand the real forces behind these disappearances and finally separate maritime tragedy from modern myth. We will investigate vanished crews, explore ghost ships found eerily empty, and question whether the truth lies in rogue waves or human error. What is it about the unknown that continues to captivate us so completely? That single, chaotic event in 1945 would become the modern cornerstone of the entire mystery. It was a calm December afternoon when 5 United States Navy Avenger torpedo bombers took off from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, on a routine training exercise known as Flight 19. The mission was straightforward, a 3-hour navigation drill over the Atlantic. The pilots were experienced, the aircraft were in perfect working order, and the weather was reported as favorable. This was not a journey into the unknown, it was a standard practice run, which makes what happened next so profoundly unsettling. About 90 minutes into the flight, a series of confused and increasingly desperate radio transmissions began to crackle over the control tower. The flight leader, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, reported that his compasses were malfunctioning. He believed they were over the Florida Keys, but his bearings were completely wrong. "Every direction looks strange," he said. "We cannot be sure of any direction. Even the ocean does not look as it should." The controllers on the ground tried to guide them home, instructing Taylor to fly west. But with his navigation instruments seemingly useless, Taylor became convinced that heading west would take them deeper out to sea. His final transmission was a fragmented, haunting message. "All planes close up tight. We will have to ditch unless landfall. When the first plane drops below 10 gallons, we all go down together. Then silence." Not a single trace of the 5 aircraft or their 14 crewmen was ever found. In a tragic twist, a massive Mariner flying boat, sent on the rescue mission with 13 men aboard, also vanished without sending a distress signal. The official Navy investigation concluded the disaster was due to pilot error and confusion, but they could not explain the complete absence of wreckage. This one incident, the loss of 5 military aircraft and a rescue plane in a single afternoon, transformed the Bermuda Triangle from sailors' lore into a global phenomenon. It provided a concrete, modern, and deeply mysterious tragedy that the public could point to, a story with real voices on a radio that simply faded into static. The legend was no longer about old wooden ships, it was about advanced technology failing in broad daylight, and that sparked a wildfire of speculation that still burns today. But the legend of the Triangle reaches back far deeper than the 20th century. Decades before those planes vanished, a maritime mystery unfolded that was even larger and more devastating. In March of 1918, the USS Cyclops, a 540-foot Navy collier loaded with 10,000 tons of manganese ore, was sailing from Brazil to Baltimore. It was a massive vessel, a floating steel mountain carrying 309 officers, crew, and passengers. The journey should have been routine. Yet after a brief stop in Barbados, the Cyclops steamed into the calm waters north of the Caribbean and simply ceased to exist. No distress call was ever heard. No lifeboats, no oil slick, not a single piece of identifiable wreckage was ever recovered. The ship and every soul aboard vanished without a trace. The sheer scale of this loss is almost incomprehensible. The disappearance of the Cyclops remains the single largest non-combat loss of life in the history of the United States Navy. 309 lives, an entire community, erased from the surface of the sea in an instant. In the immediate aftermath, with the world still at war, suspicion fell on German U-boats or a secret minefield. But no enemy nation ever claimed responsibility, and no evidence of an attack was ever found. Others pointed to the ship's unusual design, with its large cargo holds potentially stressing the hull, suggesting a catastrophic structural failure. Yet such a failure would likely have allowed at least a brief, frantic radio signal, a cry for help that never came. The official investigation closed with a haunting, unsatisfying conclusion. The fate of the Cyclops is unknown. It is a void in the historical record, a silence so profound it seems to swallow all logical explanation. This was not a small fishing boat or a private yacht. It was a colossal naval asset, and its complete disappearance suggested that the waters of the Atlantic could hide secrets of unimaginable power. The silence that swallowed the Cyclops was not an isolated phenomenon in the Atlantic. A similar, and perhaps even more chilling, mystery had unfolded decades earlier and hundreds of miles to the east. In December of 1872, a merchant brig named the Mary Celeste was spotted drifting aimlessly off the coast of Portugal. When the crew of the Dei Gratia boarded her, they found a scene of profound and unsettling normality. The ship was seaworthy, its cargo of industrial alcohol was largely intact, and there was a 6-month supply of food and water in the hold. In the captain's cabin, breakfast dishes were still on the table, as if the occupants had just stepped away. A child's toy lay on a bed. The ship's logbook, with its final entry dated 10 days prior, noted nothing amiss, but of the 10 people who had sailed aboard, including the captain's wife and young daughter, there was no sign. They had vanished, leaving behind every single one of their personal belongings and the only lifeboat. The Mary Celeste was found not in the Bermuda Triangle, but in a completely different part of the Atlantic Ocean. This fact is crucial. It demonstrates that the eerie template of a perfectly sound vessel found completely abandoned, a ghost ship with its human story erased, is a maritime mystery that can and did happen elsewhere. The theories for her fate were numerous, logical, and yet ultimately unsatisfying. Perhaps a rogue wave had terrified the crew into a panicked, premature abandonment. Maybe fumes from the alcohol cargo had caused a fear of an imminent explosion, but these explanations always stumbled on the same perplexing details. Why would an experienced captain abandon a perfectly sound ship with all provisions into a small lifeboat? Why was there no distress signal, no note, no clue? The Mary Celeste provided a blueprint for the supernatural. When logic could not fully account for the evidence, the human mind filled the void with stories of sea monsters, alien abductions, and vengeful spirits. This very same pattern of thought would later be directly applied to the disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle. A ship or plane vanishes under strange circumstances. The official explanation feels incomplete, and so the legend grows, fed by that deep, universal need for an answer, any answer, no matter how extraordinary. The Mary Celeste proved that the ocean itself could craft a mystery so perfect, so hauntingly incomplete, that it would forever defy a simple solution. The ocean's mysteries are not reserved for massive warships or crowded passenger vessels. Sometimes the most poignant losses are deeply personal. In November of 1909, the world's most accomplished solo sailor set out on a routine winter voyage and walked into legend. Joshua Slocum was a living monument of maritime skill, the first person to have single-handedly sailed around the globe. His vessel, a rebuilt oyster sloop named the Spray, was as much a part of him as his own hand. That fall, at the age of 65, Slocum left Martha's Vineyard bound for the warm waters of the Caribbean, planning to trade and explore. He was last seen alive, sailing south near the Bahamas, heading toward the very region we now call the Bermuda Triangle. He, his boat, and his unparalleled knowledge of the sea vanished completely. No wreckage was ever confirmed. For a man of his legendary capability to disappear on a calm weather trip defies all expectation. It suggests that whatever took him was something his decades of experience could not anticipate or overcome. Decades after his loss, a peculiar theory emerged to explain such events, one that moved beyond storms and into the realm of atmospheric strangeness. Some researchers began to speak of an electronic fog, a dense, glowing mist said to appear suddenly over the water. This was not an ordinary weather phenomenon. Witnesses and theorists describe it as a rolling bank of vapor that scrambles compasses, disrupts radio signals, and induces a profound sense of disorientation and timelessness in anyone caught within it. The idea proposes that a vessel or plane enveloped by this fog could lose all sense of direction and time, its crew rendered helpless as their instruments fail, and the visible world dissolves into a featureless, luminous gray. Joshua Slocum's disappearance fits this eerie pattern perfectly. A master navigator in a proven vessel on a familiar sea, simply gone without a cry for help. His story transforms the Triangle's lore from a collection of statistics into a human tragedy. It asks a haunting question. If the sea itself could not defeat Joshua Slocum, what other, more obscure force possibly did? His loss reminds us that these are not just stories of metal and wood, but of individuals of skill and spirit quietly absorbed by an inexplicable void. The disappearance of a master mariner like Joshua Slocum suggested forces beyond simple storms, but the mystery was about to ascend. Just a few years after Flight 19, the skies over the Atlantic began to claim victims with a chilling, repetitive precision. In January of 1948, a British South American Airways Avro Tudor Roman IV airliner named the Star Tiger was on a scheduled flight from the Azores to Bermuda. It carried 25 passengers and a crew of 6, all anticipating a routine landing. The weather was clear, the aircraft was in constant radio contact, and the pilot, Captain Brian McMillan, was a veteran of the Royal Air Force. His final transmission, received just before expected landfall, was utterly normal. He reported perfect weather conditions and estimated his arrival in Bermuda in under an hour. That was the last anyone ever heard from the Star Tiger. An immediate and massive air and sea search was launched, scouring thousands of square miles of ocean. Not a single piece of wreckage, no oil slick, no life raft, no floating debris was ever recovered. The official investigation into the loss was forced to admit a profound ignorance. In its conclusion, it stated, "It may truly be said that no more baffling problem has ever been presented for investigation. The circumstances were so complete that the fate of the Star Tiger must forever remain an unsolved mystery." But the story and the pattern was not finished. Almost exactly 1 year later, in January of 1949, the Star Tiger's sister ship, the Star Ariel, vanished on a flight from Bermuda to Kingston, Jamaica. The pilot, Captain John McPhee, sent a routine position report 1 hour after takeoff, mentioning excellent weather and a smooth flight. 45 minutes later, he made a second, strangely brief radio call, simply stating he was changing his radio frequency as scheduled. He never checked in on the new frequency. The Star Ariel, with 7 crew and 13 passengers, had vanished just as completely as its predecessor. Again, a vast search found nothing. 2 nearly identical modern passenger aircraft flown by experienced crews, operating on routine commercial routes in good weather, had disappeared within the same stretch of ocean within 12 months of each other. These were not small, single-engine planes. These were large, 4-engine airliners representing the height of post-war aviation technology. Their twin losses did something profound to the public consciousness. The fear was no longer confined to the surface of the sea. It had climbed into the very sky above it. If something could pluck such advanced machines from the air without leaving a single trace, without even allowing time for a distress call, then the danger felt omnipresent and utterly inexplicable. The Bermuda Triangle was no longer just a graveyard for ships, it had become a void in the sky as well. The twin vanishings of the Star Tiger and Star Ariel suggested a menace that defied technology, but sometimes the sea's dangers are tragically ordinary. In February of 1963, the SS Marine Sulphur Queen, a massive 523-foot tanker, was sailing from Beaumont, Texas to Norfolk, Virginia. Its hold was not filled with oil, but with 15,000 tons of molten sulfur, kept liquid at 275 degrees Fahrenheit. The ship sent a routine position report on February 3rd, stating all was well. It was never heard from again. A massive search eventually turned up a handful of scattered, haunting clues. A few life preservers, a single lifeboat, a broken foghorn, and a name board from the ship were found floating in the Gulf Stream. There was no sign of the 39 crewmen. At first glance, this seemed like another classic Bermuda Triangle mystery, a large vessel swallowed without a distress call. But the Marine Sulphur Queen had a story that was far from supernatural. It was a T-2 tanker, a type of vessel built rapidly during World War II, and it had undergone a radical conversion to carry its scorching cargo. The ship's internal structure was essentially a giant, uninsulated steel tank, and sulfur in its molten state is highly corrosive, especially when it reacts with water to form sulfuric acid. Investigators later discovered the ship had a history of significant structural problems, with warping and cracking reported in its hull. The official Coast Guard report painted a grimly plausible scenario. A sudden, catastrophic hull failure, perhaps from undetected corrosion or metal fatigue stressed by the heavy cargo, could have caused the ship to break apart and sink with terrifying speed. In the dark of night, in waters known for sudden squalls, there may have been no time to send a distress signal. The molten sulfur, if it contacted seawater, could have erupted in a violent chemical reaction, sealing the vessel's fate almost instantly. This case stands as a powerful counter-narrative. Here was a disappearance with all the eerie hallmarks of a triangle mystery, yet it possessed a clear, logical, and deeply human explanation rooted in flawed engineering and a dangerous cargo. It showcases how the compelling allure of the unknown can often overshadow the more probable and often more tragic truths of mechanical failure and human oversight. The sea is dangerous enough on its own terms. Yet the sea's dangers are not confined to massive tankers or open ocean voyages. Sometimes a mystery unfolds so close to shore it defies all common sense. On Christmas Eve 1967, a 55-foot cabin cruiser named the Witchcraft set out from Miami for a simple evening cruise. Its owner, an experienced hotel owner named Dan Burak, had invited a friend to join him to view the city's holiday lights from the water just 1 mile offshore. The boat was equipped with every modern safety feature, including flotation chambers designed to keep it unsinkable. Around 9 in the evening, Burak himself made a calm and clear radio call to the Miami Coast Guard. He reported that his boat had struck something submerged, possibly a log, but he emphasized there was no emergency. He simply requested a tow back to the marina. The operator noted his position and assured him a rescue boat would be there within 20 minutes. When the Coast Guard cutter arrived at the precise coordinates just minutes later, they found nothing. Not a light, not a sound, not a single piece of debris. The ocean was calm, the night was clear, and the Witchcraft, with Burak and his friend, had vanished from a spot where the glow of the city was still plainly visible on the horizon. An intensive search began immediately, scouring the shallow waters. Given the boat's unsinkable design and the fact it was only in about 15 feet of water, investigators expected to find it sitting on the bottom, perhaps damaged but intact. They found nothing, no wreck, no bodies, no sign of a struggle or sudden catastrophe. This case became a cornerstone of the Triangle legend, a tale of a vessel disappearing within sight of a major city, as if plucked from the sea. But the logical explanations, while less sensational, are compelling. Even in shallow water, striking a heavy submerged object at speed could have ruptured the hull catastrophically. The impact could have stunned or incapacitated both men, causing them to fall overboard into a swift, dark current. The famous flotation chambers would only keep the boat afloat if it remained upright and intact. A violent collision could have torn it apart, sending the heavier engine to the bottom while lighter debris was quickly carried away by the Gulf Stream. The true horror of the witchcraft story is not the supernatural, but the sheer speed and silence of a maritime accident. It demonstrates that tragedy does not require a storm or a vast, empty ocean. It can happen on a calm, festive night in familiar waters, turning a routine outing into a permanent mystery in the time it takes for a rescue boat to travel a single mile. But where exactly is this zone of vanishing? The so-called Bermuda Triangle is not an official designation on any maritime chart. Its boundaries are drawn not by geography but by legend. Most commonly, it is described as a vast triangular swath of the western Atlantic, its 3 points anchored by the bustling port of Miami, the historic city of San Juan in Puerto Rico, and the remote island of Bermuda itself. Connecting these dots creates an area of ocean covering roughly 500,000 square miles, a space larger than the entire state of Alaska, yet this shape and size are fluid. In popular tales, the triangle's borders seem to stretch and contract to encompass each new mystery, its edges as vague as the explanations for the disappearances within it. This very vagueness is part of its power, allowing the legend to absorb tragedies from a wide and ever-shifting area. But within this loosely defined zone lie very real and formidable challenges. First, these are some of the busiest shipping lanes and flight paths in the world. A constant stream of vessels and aircraft transit between the Americas, Europe, and the Caribbean here. With such high traffic volume, the statistical probability of an accident, however mysterious, is inherently higher than in a remote, empty stretch of ocean. The law of averages alone suggests that some vessels will encounter trouble here. Then there is the seafloor itself. Beneath these deceptively blue waters lie some of the deepest trenches in the Atlantic, including the Puerto Rico Trench, which plunges to depths exceeding 27,000 feet. That is deeper than Mount Everest is tall. A ship or plane sinking into such an abyss would be crushed by immense pressure and scattered by powerful currents long before any search could begin. The wreckage would simply vanish into a lightless, inaccessible grave, leaving no clue for investigators on the surface. Finally, the weather itself is a notorious actor in this region. The Atlantic here is a breeding ground for sudden, violent storms. The Gulf Stream, a powerful, warm ocean current, flows northward right through the triangle's heart. Where this warm river of water meets cooler air masses, it can generate localized, intense squalls and rogue waves, walls of water appearing without warning that can overwhelm even large ships. These are not supernatural forces. They are the documented, deadly realities of maritime travel in a complex and dynamic environment. So when we map the Devil's Triangle, we are not just sketching a myth. We are outlining a real-world stage where natural danger, human endeavor, and the deep ocean's capacity to hide its secrets all collide with dramatic consequence. This powerful river within the sea is the Gulf Stream. Picture a colossal underwater conveyor belt up to 50 miles wide and moving at a speed of over 5 miles per hour. It begins in the warm Gulf of Mexico, flows north through the Florida Strait, and then sweeps up the eastern seaboard before crossing the Atlantic toward Europe. This is not a gentle drift, it is a dominant force of nature, and it flows directly through the heart of the Bermuda Triangle. For any vessel in distress, the Gulf Stream becomes an immediate and overwhelming adversary. Imagine a ship's engine fails or a small plane makes an emergency water landing. In calm, still waters, they might remain relatively close to their last reported position. But in the grip of the Gulf Stream, they are no longer stationary. They become leaves caught in a relentless, invisible river. That life raft or floating fuselage could be carried dozens, even hundreds of miles away from where search teams are initially looking, all within a single day. This simple fact of oceanography turns every search into a race against a massive, moving clock, dramatically shrinking the window for rescue and complicating recovery efforts before they even begin. But the current's role in these mysteries goes beyond just moving whole objects. It also acts as a master of concealment. When a vessel sinks, it often leaves behind telltale clues on the surface, a spreading oil slick from its ruptured fuel tanks, or a field of floating debris like wooden planks, personal items, or life jackets. In most parts of the ocean, these markers would linger, pointing searchers toward the tragedy below. The Gulf Stream, however, does not allow for such stillness. Its churning, turbulent waters and powerful surface flow act like a giant, dispersing fan. An oil slick is quickly broken apart and diluted across miles of ocean, becoming invisible to spotter planes. Lightweight debris is scattered across a vast and ever-widening area, often sinking or becoming waterlogged and submerged. Within hours, the physical evidence that a disaster even occurred can be utterly erased from view. So a ship that sinks in these waters doesn't just vanish into the deep. The very proof of its sinking is swept away by this immense natural river. It creates a perfect scenario for a mystery where the absence of evidence feels less like an accident of search and more like an act of deliberate oceanic erasure. Yet the ocean floor itself may hold a key to these sudden vanishings. Deep beneath the waves, trapped in sediment under immense pressure and cold, lie vast reservoirs of frozen methane gas known as methane hydrates. Picture a slushy, ice-like solid, but one that burns if you bring it to the surface. These deposits are not a myth, they are a documented geological fact, and one of the world's largest fields, called the Blake Ridge, sits directly on the floor of the Bermuda Triangle. The scientific theory is as dramatic as it is plausible. Imagine an underwater landslide, perhaps triggered by a small earthquake or a shift in seafloor pressure. This disturbance destabilizes a pocket of these frozen hydrates. Suddenly, the solid methane transforms back into its gaseous state, erupting from the seabed in a colossal, rising plume of bubbles. This is not a gentle fizz, it is a catastrophic undersea geyser. For a ship passing overhead, the effect would be both instantaneous and terrifying. A vessel floats because the water beneath it is dense enough to provide buoyancy. But a massive, rising column of methane gas turns that water into a frothing, aerated foam, drastically reducing its density. In that moment, the sea literally loses its ability to hold the ship up. The vessel would no longer be sailing on water, it would be caught in a suffocating, gaseous void. It would lose all buoyancy and sink like a stone, pulled down by its own weight in a matter of seconds. There would be no time for a distress call, no chance to launch lifeboats. The ship would be swallowed whole, and within minutes, as the gas bubbles dissipate, the ocean's surface would smooth over as if nothing had ever happened. This methane hydrate theory, often called the Bermuda bubble, provides a starkly scientific explanation for some of the most baffling cases. It turns the legend into a potential geological event where the very floor of the triangle can, without warning, betray the ships that travel above it. The silent, swift, and complete disappearance of a vessel is no longer supernatural. It is a tragic encounter with a deep earth process, a reminder that some of the ocean's greatest dangers are not on its surface, but hidden far below in the dark. But the sea's treachery is not confined to the deep. Its surface can erupt with a violence that defies belief. For centuries, sailors spoke of walls of water appearing from nowhere, colossal waves that towered over a ship's mast before crashing down to seal its fate. These stories were dismissed as the terrified exaggerations of storm-tossed men, mere maritime myths. Then, on New Year's Day, 1995, a laser mounted on an oil platform in the North Sea recorded a single monstrous wave. It was 84 feet high, appearing in a sea where the surrounding waves were only 40 feet. Science had finally confirmed the existence of the rogue wave. These are not simply large swells in a storm. They are spontaneous, singular giants, often described as a wall of water or a deep hole in the ocean, capable of reaching heights of 100 feet or more. They form when multiple wave systems created by distant storms converge and stack their energy at one precise point through a process called constructive interference. In that moment, the sea focuses its power into a single, devastating punch. For any vessel, the encounter is catastrophic. A wall of water can roll a large ship onto its side, breaking its back. A deep trough can cause a ship to plunge bow first into a void, only to be buried by the next mountain of water. Modern cargo ships and tankers are engineered to withstand tremendous forces, but the physics of a rogue wave are uniquely brutal. The stress is concentrated and sudden, often overwhelming the hull's design limits in one shuddering impact, and the geography of the Bermuda Triangle makes it a potential breeding ground for such freak occurrences. This is a crossroads of weather. Storms sweeping down from the North Atlantic can collide with systems brewing in the Caribbean, while the powerful Gulf Stream itself can refract and channel wave energy in unpredictable ways. This chaotic convergence of forces creates a sea state perfectly primed for those rare, deadly moments when waves sync up to form a monster. A ship caught by such a wave could be shattered and sent to the bottom in minutes, leaving behind little more than a fading disturbance on the water's surface, a disturbance quickly erased by the very currents that helped create the wave in the first place. The legend of wildly spinning compasses is a cornerstone of the Triangle's eerie reputation. Sailors and pilots have long reported their navigation instruments behaving erratically, as if some invisible force was pulling the needle away from its true course. This phenomenon finds its roots not in the supernatural, but in a unique and very real quirk of Earth's geography. Our planet has two north poles. One is the fixed geographic pole, the top of the world's axis. The other is the magnetic North Pole, a point in the Arctic that shifts over time as the Earth's molten core churns. A magnetic compass points to this moving magnetic pole, not the true geographic one. The difference between these 2 points is called magnetic variation, and for most of history, navigators had to calculate this difference to plot an accurate course. Here is where the Bermuda Triangle presents a genuine, if often misunderstood, navigational oddity. There is a line on the globe where magnetic north and true north perfectly align, where the variation is zero. This line, called the Agonic Line, runs directly through the heart of the Western Atlantic. For a mariner in the age of sail, or even a pilot in the early 20th century, crossing this invisible boundary without being aware of it could indeed cause confusion. If your charts were not perfectly updated, or if you failed to account for the shift, your compass would seem to drift without explanation. You might believe you were sailing east when you were actually heading slightly northeast, an error that over hundreds of miles could lead you dangerously off course. Historical accounts of this confusion go back to the very beginning of Western exploration in the region. Christopher Columbus himself, during his first voyage in 1492, recorded in his log that his compass needle shifted unexpectedly as he sailed through the Sargasso Sea. His crew grew alarmed, fearing they had sailed beyond the known rules of nature. Columbus, a shrewd navigator, calmed them by suggesting the needle was not faulty, but was instead pointing toward the North Star, a clever bit of reasoning that happened to be incorrect but served its purpose. His experience shows that the area's magnetic peculiarities have been noted for centuries, long before the triangle had a name. Today, with the Global Positioning System, or GPS, satellites provide pinpoint accuracy that is completely independent of the Earth's magnetic field. The Agonic Line holds no terror for modern navigation, yet the image of a spinning compass needle remains a powerful symbol within the triangle mythos. It represents a tangible loss of control, a moment where trusted technology fails and the traveler is cast adrift, both literally and psychologically, in a vast and indifferent sea. It is a perfect metaphor for the entire mystery, where a documented natural phenomenon becomes the seed for tales of something far more sinister. Yet even the most advanced compass can be rendered useless by a simple, universal flaw. The most common culprit in any mystery on land or sea is not a phantom force but the human mind itself. Fatigue, poor judgment, overconfidence, and simple error have steered more vessels to disaster than any rogue wave or magnetic anomaly. Throughout maritime history, the gravest dangers have often come from the bridge, not the sea. Consider the very incident that ignited the modern legend. In the final, confused radio transmissions from Flight 19, Lieutenant Charles Taylor sounded not like a man confronting the supernatural, but like a pilot wrestling with profound disorientation. He was a relatively new instructor, possibly fatigued from a long day, flying over a featureless expanse of water. When his compasses malfunctioned, a fact later confirmed by the investigation, he fell back on instinct and visual cues. He believed he saw the Florida Keys, but he was almost certainly looking at the Bahamas, a chain of islands that can appear startlingly similar from the air. His decision to turn east, convinced he was heading back over the Gulf of Mexico, instead took his squadron deeper into the open Atlantic. This was not a failure of technology alone, but a cascade of human factors. Fatigue clouded his reasoning. Spatial disorientation, a terrifying but well-documented condition where a pilot's senses contradict his instruments, took hold. The pressure of leading 4 other planes and 14 young trainees likely compounded every mistake. In that moment, the triangle's natural hazards, the vastness, the swift Gulf Stream, the potential for sudden weather became not the cause of the tragedy, but the stage upon which a human drama of error played out to its devastating conclusion. This pattern repeats across the centuries. An exhausted captain misjudges a storm's speed. A navigator, overconfident in his calculations, fails to account for a current. A crew, inadequately trained for an emergency, panics and makes a fatal decision. The sea does not forgive these lapses, it amplifies them. What might be a minor mishap in coastal waters becomes a catastrophe in a deep, remote, and unforgiving environment. The legend of the Triangle provides a seductive escape from this uncomfortable truth. It is easier to blame a mysterious, external force than to accept that skilled, well-intentioned people can make mistakes with irreversible consequences. But in doing so, we overlook the most profound lesson these stories offer. They are not tales of monsters, but monuments to human fallibility, reminding us that our greatest challenge in mastering the natural world has always been, and will always be, mastering ourselves. The Atlantic's most violent weather is born here. The region we call the Bermuda Triangle sits squarely within what meteorologists have long labeled Hurricane Alley, a vast corridor of warm ocean stretching from the west coast of Africa to the Caribbean and the southeastern United States. This is the primary breeding ground for the Atlantic's most powerful and destructive storms. From late spring through autumn, the warm waters act as a colossal engine, fueling systems that can grow from a cluster of thunderstorms into a Category 5 monster in a matter of days. But it is not just the headline-grabbing hurricanes that pose a threat. The same volatile conditions can spawn smaller, far more sudden tempests known as white squalls. These are not widespread storms, they are localized, furious outbursts of wind and wave that can materialize with almost no warning. Picture a clear horizon darkening in minutes, a wall of wind-driven spray obliterating visibility, and waves building from a gentle swell to a chaotic, breaking fury in the time it takes a crew to scramble on deck. For a sailing ship of the 18th or 19th century, or even a small motor vessel in the early 20th, such an onslaught could be a death sentence. A white squall could capsize a ship, sweep its decks clean, or drive it under before the captain could even reach the radio room. The distress signal requires time to recognize the severity, time to reach the equipment, time to transmit. In the face of a meteorological ambush, that time simply does not exist. When we re-examine the historical record with modern weather data, a compelling pattern emerges. The disappearance of the USS Cyclops in March of 1918, for instance, coincided with a period of notoriously rough weather and high winds reported across the western Atlantic. While no specific hurricane was recorded, the conditions were precisely those that could generate dangerous, steep seas capable of overwhelming a heavily laden vessel. The loss of the SS Marine Sulphur Queen in February of 1963 occurred during a month known for powerful winter gales sweeping down from the North American coast, capable of producing waves that could stress a compromised hull to its breaking point. These were not calm, sunny days suddenly turned supernatural. They were voyages undertaken during seasons and in regions where the ocean's temper is famously short. The legend often strips away this context, presenting each disappearance as an event in a vacuum of perfect conditions. But the truth is far more grounded and in many ways more terrifying. The real monster in these waters has a name we know well. It is the storm in all its sudden, varied, and overwhelming forms. It suggests that a significant number of the Triangle's mysteries may not be mysteries at all, but tragedies witnessed only by the wind and the waves, where the first and only report of disaster was the lasting silence that followed. The sea's surface may be the stage for storms, but its true hiding place is the crushing dark below. Within the loosely drawn borders of the Bermuda Triangle lies one of the most extreme landscapes on our planet, the Puerto Rico Trench. This is not a gentle slope, it is a sheer plunge into an abyss that reaches depths exceeding 27,000 feet. To put that in perspective, if you could place Mount Everest at the bottom of this trench, its summit would still be over a mile beneath the ocean's surface. This staggering depth is the ultimate explanation for the silence that follows so many disappearances. A vessel or aircraft that sinks here is not settling onto a sandy continental shelf where light can reach and divers can explore. It is embarking on a final, miles-long descent into a realm of perpetual darkness, immense pressure, and near-freezing cold. At those depths, the pressure is over 800 times greater than at sea level, enough to implode a standard submarine like a tin can. Any wreckage that survives the initial descent is subjected to forces that will crush, twist, and scatter it across a vast, invisible seabed. The idea that we should find floating debris or oil slicks after such an event is almost naive. The ocean floor here is a perfect natural vault, sealing its contents away with a force far beyond human intervention. For most of history, this meant a ship lost in these waters was simply gone, its fate relegated to speculation and legend. We lack not just the means to reach such depths, but even the basic technology to map them with any accuracy. Searching for a specific wreck in this environment was, and remains, like looking for a single lost coin in a pitch-black, mountainous desert the size of a small country. The cost is astronomical, requiring specialized research vessels, advanced sonar arrays, and robotic submersibles that can withstand the pressure for only short windows of time. It is a task of needle in a haystack proportions, where the haystack is made of liquid and lies under 5 miles of water. This technological barrier is crucial to understanding the mystery. For decades, the absence of evidence was taken as evidence of the extraordinary, but consider a parallel story from a different part of the ocean. The wreck of the RMS Titanic was located in 1985, 73 years after it sank, and only after a concerted, expensive search using then cutting-edge side-scan sonar. Its discovery proved that even the most famous lost ship could remain hidden in the deep Atlantic for generations, awaiting the right technology to find it. In recent years, sonar mapping and autonomous underwater vehicles have begun to locate other historic wrecks once thought vanished forever, from World War II warships to 19th century clippers. Each discovery is a quiet rebuttal to the supernatural. It demonstrates that the ocean is not erasing ships, it is merely storing them in a place we are only now learning to access. The implication for the Bermuda Triangle is profound. It suggests that many of its legendary lost vessels, from the Cyclops to the Marine Sulphur Queen, are not dissolved into nothingness. They are likely resting in the profound stillness of the trench or scattered across its slopes, preserved in the cold dark, waiting for the day our search technology finally descends to their level and shines a light on their final moments. The deep ocean may hide its wrecks, but sometimes it offers up a mystery on the shore. In the cold dawn of January 31st, 1921, a Coast Guard patrol boat sighted a 5-masted schooner hard aground on the treacherous Diamond Shoals off Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. The ship was the Carroll A. Deering, and it presented a tableau of abandonment so complete it has never been satisfactorily explained. When the rescue party finally boarded the stranded vessel days later, they walked into a scene suspended in time. In the galley, a meal of peas and cabbage was still sitting on the stove, prepared but never eaten. The crew's personal belongings, their oilskins and sea boots, were neatly stowed in their quarters. The ship's log, navigation books, and the captain's personal papers were all gone. Most tellingly, the lifeboats were missing and the steering gear. The massive wheel and chains that guided the ship had been deliberately dismantled and disabled. It was as if the 10-man crew had simply paused their lives and walked off the deck into the sea. The Deering had last been seen under full sail 2 days before its discovery, passing a lightship with a strange, red-haired man on deck who reported the ship had lost its anchors. The captain was nowhere to be seen. From that moment, the ship became a true ghost, sailing itself onto the shoals. The official investigations that followed spun a web of theories but found no answers. Was it a mutiny? The first mate and several crewmen were rumored to be difficult, and the captain was a strict disciplinarian. Did pirates, perhaps from the Caribbean or even Bolshevik rum runners, seize the ship and abandon it? The missing log and papers pointed to a desire to hide the ship's identity or its final days. Or was it a more mundane, tragic sequence, a sudden squall or illness, a panicked and botched abandonment, leaving the ship to drift unmanned into the coast? The Carroll A. Deering sits on the very northern fringe of the area we now call the Bermuda Triangle. Its story contains none of the signature elements of a sudden, mid-ocean vaporization. It was found, not lost, yet its utter lack of a human explanation, the eerie domesticity of its abandoned state, and its location in these infamously treacherous waters have cemented its place in the legend. It represents a different kind of triangle mystery, one not of complete disappearance, but of human absence. The ship remained, but the story of its people was erased, leaving only a haunting, empty stage for our imagination to fill. A glimmer of hope emerged from the deep in 1991. A salvage team searching for a sunken Spanish galleon off the coast of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, made a stunning discovery. Their sonar had found not a wooden hull, but the distinct, angular outline of a World War II-era aircraft resting on the seabed. As underwater cameras descended, the image clarified into the unmistakable silhouette of a Grumman Avenger torpedo bomber, the very type flown by the lost Flight 19. The excitement was immediate and electric. After nearly 5 decades of silence, had the ocean finally given up one of its most famous secrets? Could this be Lieutenant Charles Taylor's plane, a tangible clue to the fate of those 14 men? The discovery sparked a media frenzy, with headlines proclaiming a potential breakthrough in the Bermuda Triangle's greatest mystery. The public's imagination and the hope of families was reignited. Here was a chance at last to replace legend with evidence, to read the story written in bent metal and scattered debris on the ocean floor. The promise of that single, ghostly image was immense. It felt like a crack in the door of a sealed room, a chance to finally peer inside. But the ocean is a master of false leads and incomplete stories. The real work of identification was just beginning, a meticulous process that would temper excitement with cold, hard facts. The salvage team carefully recovered a small, critical component from the wreck, a data plate that held the aircraft's unique serial number. This number is the forensic fingerprint of any military plane, linking it indelibly to its manufacturing records and service history. Researchers cross-referenced this number with naval archives, and the answer was definitive yet deeply anticlimactic. This Avenger was not from Flight 19. Its records showed it had crashed during a different training exercise in 1947, 2 years after the famous disappearance, with the loss of its entire 3-man crew. The plane on the seabed was a tragic mystery in its own right, but it was not the one everyone was looking for. This moment perfectly illustrates the immense challenge of underwater archaeology, especially in the vast and deep theater of the Atlantic. Finding a needle in a haystack is one thing, but first you must be sure you have found the right needle. The ocean floor is littered with the wreckage of history, from downed aircraft and sunken ships to discarded machinery and lost cargo. Each sonar contact holds potential, but only painstaking, often dangerous investigation can reveal its true identity. The 1991 Avenger was a poignant reminder of this reality. It gave the world a glimpse of a solution, only to gently take it away, returning the fate of Flight 19 to the realm of the unknown. Yet, paradoxically, such discoveries do not extinguish hope, they fuel it. Every time technology peers into the deep and finds a lost piece of the past, it proves that these vessels and planes are not vaporized, they are out there waiting. Each find, even if it is not the one we seek, refines the search techniques and strengthens the conviction that one day, the right serial number will be matched and a ghost will finally be given a name. While nature presents formidable dangers, the greatest threat on any ocean has always been other people. The busy shipping lanes that crisscross the triangle have, for centuries, been a hunting ground for a very old and human evil. From the Spanish Main to the modern Caribbean, pirates have prowled these waters, their motives simple and brutal. A lone merchant ship far from help could be easily overtaken, its cargo stolen and its crew murdered or forced to walk the plank. The vessel itself might be repurposed or simply burned and scuttled to hide the evidence. In the age of sail, such an attack would leave no distress call, only a lingering absence. A ship reported missing in these waters could just as easily have fallen to cutlasses and cannon as to any storm. Its fate attributed to the sea's general cruelty rather than a specific act of violence. This shadow of piracy extends well beyond the golden age of Blackbeard. Throughout the 20th century, incidents of maritime hijacking, smuggling, and foul play have persisted in the region, reminding us that human greed is a perennial navigational hazard. But there exists an even more calculated and legally murkier human explanation. The deep, remote waters of the Triangle offer the perfect stage for a crime that leaves no witnesses and no evidence. It is the crime of insurance fraud, a deliberate act of destruction disguised as a tragic accident. The scheme is chillingly straightforward. A shipowner finds himself with an aging vessel, a declining market, or mounting debts. The ship is insured for a value far greater than its worth on the open market. He hires a complicit or perhaps desperate captain and crew. They set sail on a routine route through the Triangle with a cargo that is often minimal or worthless. Once they reach a suitably deep and isolated stretch of ocean, the plan goes into action. The crew is quietly transferred to a waiting pickup boat, often under cover of darkness. Then the scuttling begins. Sea valves are opened or explosive charges are set. The ship is sent to the bottom, miles down into an abyss where no insurance investigator could ever hope to find or examine it. The captain and crew, now safely ashore with new identities and payment for their silence, report their vessel lost to a sudden, mysterious catastrophe. The owner collects a massive insurance payout, and the legend of the Bermuda Triangle gains another compelling, unsolved case. This theory transforms the Triangle from a force of nature into a convenient alibi. Its reputation for the inexplicable does the criminal's work for him. When the insurance company's adjusters hear a ship disappeared in those waters, amidst stories of electronic fog and compass failure, their suspicion is naturally directed toward the supernatural rather than the criminal. The lack of wreckage or survivors, which seems so mysterious, is actually the central requirement for the fraud to succeed. It ensures no one can prove the ship was deliberately sunk. While proving such conspiracies is notoriously difficult, maritime historians and insurers acknowledge it has happened. The temptation is undeniable. A single, well-timed disappearance in the right place can erase financial ruin. So when we hear of a solitary freighter vanishing on a calm night, it is worth considering not just the power of the sea, but the desperation or greed of the people who sailed on it. The ocean's depths can hide more than sunken ships. They can bury the truth of a perfectly planned and perfectly human deception. The human capacity for deception is matched only by our hunger for a compelling story. By the 1970s, the scattered disappearances and official reports were ready to be woven into a single, electrifying narrative, and popular culture was eager to supply the thread. The transformation began not with a film, but with a book. In 1974, author Charles Berlitz published The Bermuda Triangle, a work that would rocket to the top of bestseller lists and fundamentally reshape the mystery for a global audience. Berlitz did not present a balanced investigation. He curated a collection of the most baffling cases, often omitting crucial context like storm reports or known structural flaws, and presented them as an interconnected pattern of the inexplicable. His prose leaned heavily into suggestion, framing each disappearance as a clue in a grand, unsolvable puzzle. Most significantly, he gave equal weight to sensational theories, seriously entertaining the idea that the triangle was a portal for extraterrestrial visitors, or perhaps a technological graveyard for the lost civilization of Atlantis. Berlitz's book was a phenomenon because it offered something the dry naval reports did not: a unified, thrilling myth. It presented the ocean not just as dangerous, but as deliberately mysterious, a place where the normal rules of physics and logic were suspended. This single volume provided the blueprint, and television was quick to build upon it. Programs like In Search Of, hosted by the grave and authoritative Leonard Nimoy, brought the triangle's eerie tales directly into living rooms. With its haunting theme music and dramatic reenactments, the show treated every theory, from time warps to alien abductions, as a legitimate possibility waiting to be proven. It was entertainment framed as investigation, and it expertly played on the viewer's sense of wonder and unease. This cultural embedding reached its peak in the 1990s with The X-Files, a series built on the motto "The truth is out there." The Triangle featured not as a standalone mystery, but as a recurring piece of a vast, government-obscured paranormal tapestry. It was a place where experimental aircraft vanished into other dimensions and where ancient forces lurked beneath the waves. These shows were not concerned with maritime safety statistics or the properties of methane hydrates. Their currency was the unresolved question, the chilling possibility, the shadow just outside the frame. They prioritized mood and mystery over factual rigor, and in doing so, they cemented the Bermuda Triangle's place not as a navigational region, but as a modern folklore icon. The result was a powerful feedback loop. The fictional treatments made the legend more famous, which inspired more documentaries, which in turn referenced the fictional treatments as part of the mythos. The line between documented incident and imaginative speculation blurred beyond recognition, creating a cultural artifact far more enduring and emotionally resonant than the sum of its historical parts. But what do the actual numbers say? When we step back from the chilling stories and look at the cold, hard statistics, a very different picture emerges. For decades, Lloyd's of London, the world's leading insurance market for shipping, has maintained meticulous records of maritime losses. Their data consistently shows that the Bermuda Triangle is not a statistical outlier. The rate of vessel disappearances in that region, when adjusted for the immense volume of ship and air traffic that passes through it, is no higher than in any other heavily traveled part of the world's oceans, like the North Sea or the waters off Japan. The United States Coast Guard, the primary agency responsible for search and rescue in the area, has stated this plainly. They have repeatedly affirmed that they do not recognize the Bermuda Triangle as a geographic area of specific hazard. In their official view, the combination of environmental forces there, the Gulf Stream, sudden storms, deep trenches, does create challenges, but these are the normal, accounted for risks of seafaring, not evidence of a paranormal vortex. The raw numbers bear this out. While over 50 ships and 20 aircraft are said to have vanished in the triangle over the last century, that figure represents a tiny, tiny fraction of the total traffic. Hundreds of thousands of safe transits occur for every one mysterious loss. The percentage of incidents is so low it falls well within the expected range of maritime and aviation accidents worldwide. This statistical reality forces a crucial perspective shift. Our brains are wired for narrative, not for probability. We remember the one terrifying story of the ship that vanished, not the 10,000 that sailed through without incident. This cognitive bias, called the availability heuristic, makes rare, dramatic events seem far more common and significant than they are. The legend of the Triangle is a perfect storm of this bias. It gathers a century's worth of disparate, tragic accidents from a vast area, strips them of their individual contexts, the storms, the human errors, the mechanical failures, and presents them as a connected pattern of the inexplicable. The data dismantles that pattern. It tells us that if you sail from Miami to Bermuda, you are not embarking on a journey into the unknown. You are undertaking a routine voyage, one governed by the same laws of physics, weather, and chance that apply everywhere else on the planet. The mystery, then, may not be in the water, but in our own perception, in our deep need to find meaning and connection even in random tragedy. The legend thrives on ships that never return, but what happens when one finally does? In late November of 1925, the SS Cotopaxi, a sturdy cargo steamer loaded with coal, departed Charleston, South Carolina, bound for Havana, Cuba. 2 days into the voyage, the ship sent out a routine distress signal indicating it was taking on water. Then, like so many others, it vanished into the vast Atlantic. For nearly a century, the Cotopaxi was just another name on the Triangle's long list, a footnote of maritime loss. Its fame was amplified decades later when it made a surprising cameo in Steven Spielberg's science fiction film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. In the movie, the Cotopaxi is discovered perfectly preserved, sitting in the middle of the Gobi Desert, a visual metaphor for the Triangle's power to teleport objects across space and time. Art had taken a minor historical tragedy and spun it into a grand cosmic mystery. The real ship, however, was presumed to be resting in an unmarked grave somewhere on the ocean floor, its true story buried with it. That assumption held firm for 95 years. Then, in 2020, a team of marine explorers made a startling announcement. They believed they had found the wreck of the Cotopaxi. Using historical ship records and modern sonar technology, they had identified a sunken vessel lying in about 300 feet of water, not in a remote abyss, but just 35 miles off the coast of St. Augustine, Florida. The evidence was compelling. The size and design of the wreck matched the Cotopaxi's specifications. Crucially, the ship's bell was not found, but researchers located a key piece of manufacturing data on the boiler that aligned with the builder of the Cotopaxi. While not 100% conclusive without that bell, the identification is considered highly probable by many maritime historians. This potential discovery is a quiet revolution in how we view these old mysteries. The Cotopaxi did not slip through a dimensional rift or become a trophy for aliens. It likely foundered in a storm, sent a final, desperate SOS, and sank relatively close to land. For generations, it was simply lost, waiting. Its story remained unfinished not because the event was supernatural, but because the technology to find it in 300 feet of murky, sandy water did not yet exist. The identification, if confirmed, changes the Cotopaxi's entire narrative. It transforms it from a permanent question mark into a resolved, if tragic, historical event. It demonstrates a powerful, hopeful truth. Many of the triangle's ghosts may not be phantoms at all. They are puzzles whose pieces have been scattered across the seafloor, awaiting the right combination of historical sleuthing, sonar mapping, and robotic cameras to finally put them back together. Each identified wreck shrinks the realm of the unexplained, replacing myth with a tangible, if somber, artifact. It suggests that the ocean's greatest secret may be patience, the long wait for us to develop the eyes to see what has been there all along. The legend of the Bermuda Triangle was born in an era of limited sight. For centuries, sailors navigated by compass and stars, pilots flew with rudimentary radios and basic instruments, and storms could arrive with little more warning than a darkening horizon. In that world, the vast Atlantic was a place of genuine mystery, where a single mechanical failure or a sudden squall could erase all connection to the world you left behind. Today, that world is gone. The secret of the lost ships may have been, in large part, a technological gap. The gap between the immense natural dangers of that ocean and our ability to see them coming or call for help. Modern navigation has effectively conquered the triangle, not by changing the sea but by illuminating it. The Global Positioning System, or GPS, provides a constant, unerring fix on your location anywhere on the planet, rendering the old fears of magnetic anomalies and spinning compasses completely obsolete. A captain or pilot now knows their exact position within feet at every single moment of the journey. Communication is no longer a fragile thread of static-filled radio waves. Satellite phones and data systems allow for continuous contact, while emergency position indicating radio beacons, or EPIRBs, automatically activate when a vessel is in distress, transmitting a unique identifier and precise coordinates to search and rescue satellites within minutes, day or night. Perhaps most importantly, our window into the future of the weather has widened dramatically. Advanced radar, ocean buoys, and satellite imagery provide real-time tracking of storm systems, allowing ships and aircraft to be rerouted days in advance of dangerous conditions. The rogue wave remains a threat, but we are now far better at predicting the sea states that can breed them. The result of this technological shield is a simple, powerful fact. Every single day, hundreds of commercial cargo ships, cruise liners, and passenger aircraft traverse the Bermuda Triangle on routine, uneventful voyages. They carry millions of tons of goods and thousands of passengers safely from port to port. The area remains one of the busiest corridors for global trade and travel on the planet. The disappearances that fueled the legend have not ceased because the Triangle's power was broken, but because we finally built the tools to navigate its very real challenges safely. The mystery persists as a cultural artifact, a ghost story from a time when the ocean could still swallow you without a trace. Today, the sea is watched, mapped, and listened to. The silence that once felt so profound has been filled with the constant, reassuring digital chatter of a connected world. Perhaps the most compelling reason the Triangle's legend endures is its simplicity. A mysterious stretch of ocean swallows ships and planes. It is a clean, captivating story that fits neatly into a headline or a campfire tale. The human mind craves patterns and narratives, especially when faced with the chaotic, random nature of real-world tragedy. It is psychologically easier to accept a single, powerful villain, a supernatural vortex, a time warp, a hungry patch of sea, than to grapple with a tangled web of mundane causes. A storm, a navigational error, a structural failure, a sudden rogue wave, these are complex and impersonal. They offer no grand design, no intentional mystery, just the cold mechanics of accident and environment. The supernatural explanation, by contrast, gives meaning to the meaningless. It transforms a statistical probability into a purposeful event, making the vast, indifferent ocean feel strangely personal, even if its intentions are terrifying. This taps into a much older, deeper part of our psychology. For millennia, humans have used stories to explain the unexplainable, from thunder gods to sea monsters. The Bermuda Triangle is a modern incarnation of that same instinct. In an age of satellites and science, it is a pocket of sanctioned mystery, a place where we can still wonder. It connects directly to other enduring modern myths, from sightings of Bigfoot to stories of alien visitors at Area 51. These are not merely lies or hoaxes, though those exist. They are cultural pressure valves, narratives that thrive in the gaps between what we know and what we wish we could understand. They satisfy a profound need for awe, for the sense that the world still holds wonders just beyond the edge of our maps. And we must be honest, the sheer power of a good story cannot be overstated. The tales from the Triangle are masterpieces of suspense. They have all the classic elements: brave explorers, advanced technology, a sudden and complete silence, and an absence of evidence that feels more ominous than any corpse. These stories are emotionally resonant in a way that a technical report on hull corrosion could never be. They are passed down, embellished, and repeated because they are fundamentally great to tell and to hear. Each retelling adds another layer to the myth, cementing it in our collective imagination far more firmly than any debunking article ever could. Yet, for all the psychological and cultural reasons the legend persists, we must hold space for a final, humbling truth. While most cases have likely, if tragic, explanations grounded in weather, error, or geology, a stubborn few defy any comfortable closure. The USS Cyclops, with its 309 souls, remains a genuine enigma. Its scale, its timing, and the complete lack of any debris field continue to puzzle maritime historians. No theory, not a storm, not a structural failure, not even the methane hydrate hypothesis fully satisfies all the questions. It stands as a monument to the ocean's capacity for genuine, unresolved mystery. The Triangle may be largely a legend built on coincidence and amplified by storytelling, but within that legend are anchored a few very real, very silent ships that the sea has never given back. Their enduring silence is a whisper that perhaps not every story has been fully told, a quiet reminder that some secrets are kept forever by the deep. The ocean's true dangers are formidable, but they bear familiar names. Rogue waves rise from chaotic physics, not phantom energy. The Gulf Stream is a relentless river, not a supernatural current. Deep trenches hide wreckage with immense pressure, not otherworldly intent. The secret of the Bermuda Triangle's lost ships lies not in the extraordinary, but in the amplification of ordinary perils by a vast and indifferent sea. When tragedy strikes in such a remote and deep environment, the evidence is often scattered, sunk, or swept away by natural forces far more effective than any myth. Our greatest role in this mystery has been that of the storyteller. Faced with a void of information, a silent radio, an empty horizon, the human mind instinctively constructs a narrative. We fill the gaps left by lost logs and missing wreckage with tales of time warps, alien visitors, and ancient curses. The legend is a testament not to paranormal activity, but to our profound need for explanation, for a pattern that makes the random tragedies of the deep feel somehow meaningful. This creative impulse is a powerful, deeply human response to the unknown. Yet as we explore these captivating stories, we must always hold space for the sobering reality at their core. Each disappearance represents real people, captains, crews, passengers, families waiting in vain for a return that never comes. Their stories are not plot points in a supernatural thriller, but human histories cut short by the very real dangers of maritime life. We honor them not by sensationalizing their fate, but by remembering the courage it takes to venture upon the sea, and by continually refining our understanding of its power. What's your favorite theory about the Triangle? Even if you know it's likely just a story, share your thoughts in the comments below. The discussion is part of what keeps history alive. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the ocean's greatest legends, subscribe for more journeys into the past where we separate fact from folklore. Next time, we'll set sail for another chilling maritime mystery, one that involves a ghost ship found drifting under full sail with a crew that vanished into thin air.